So, welcome to today's AMA. We are going to be talking about this upcoming solar eclipse almost exclusively. There is so much potent astrology in the month of April this year, and I was reflecting on it. I've actually been looking at this astrology since about 2018 because it is such an intense astrological month. And there's quite a lot to talk about. That being said, I am going to explain this in full. I realize that a lot of you have studied astrology and some of you have not. There might be some concepts that we broach in today's talk that are different even from what we normally talk about in these AMAs, because I am going to talk about a couple things that are very distinct with this eclipse in particular. So we are having on Monday a total solar eclipse in the sign of Aries at 19 degrees and 24 minutes. Now, if you read the newsletter, you might have noticed that this is a really distinct placement. Of course, eclipses, converge at the same degree and minute of the sun and the moon, but this is involving a third planet also, well, it's an asteroid, also at the same degree and minute. So the 19 degrees, 24 minutes, right? 360 degrees in a circle, 60 minutes in a degree. So this is a very powerful and palpable conjunction during this total solar eclipse. Most people in this membership are in the United States. It is affecting the United States more than other places. So if you are or happen to be in the United States, or if you're not and you're from the United States or Canada, there's a big sort of swath of energy, also Mexico, that's being affected, where you can see at least the eclipse in part. So let's talk about Chiron, first of all, and what it means to have a total conjunction here with Chiron. So Chiron in mythology is the wounded healer. In the stories of Chiron, he is the half-brother of Zeus, and he lives on a mountain, but a mountain much closer to Earth. Zeus lives on Mount Olympus. He's in the sky. He's overlooking things. Chiron lives a bit lower to the earth and is connected much more with nature and with the human arts, which in these systems, the human arts, right, music, medicine, other art forms, things like combat, these are our ways of being able to access higher principles, right? So half the time we're just, vibing in our lives, doing our day-to-day activities. And then sometimes we write a symphony, right? Or a metaphorical symphony. So Chiron would teach many of the heroes in mythology, things like astrology, the healing arts, music, and this is what he did. Now, most centaurs in mythology are actually quite warring. They're really violent sometimes. They're full of upheaval. But Chiron himself is a very wise teacher. So he had been able to hone his animalistic qualities, represented by his horse half, and really shine brightly the sort of superhuman, superconscious qualities represented by his immortal parts. Now, Chiron at one point is accidentally pierced with an arrow and has a wound he can't heal because the arrow is laced with the blood of the Hydra. And so it's this sort of intense wounding that causes him a lot of pain that he can't heal. Eventually, he trades his immortality off so that they can free Prometheus, and he gets commemorated in the stars as the constellation of Sagittarius. So that's Chiron. When we think about Chiron mythology, we think about the capacity to be both wounded and to heal. Okay. And a lot of the times people think of wounding like it's bad and healing like it's good, or they think of healing like it's moving away from wounding. But in these mythologies, it actually teaches that the healing is in the wound. So in these stories, consciousness itself moved out of the unified field to create the world of multiplicity. When it did that, it caused a sort of fragmentation of the unified field so that we could be individuated beings, but that also caused a wound, right? The wound of limitation. So to be, for example, a human, you have to, in a sense, forget, at least temporarily, that you are actually a piece of the entire universe, right? And so in the wounding is the healing as well, right? So in the understanding of you are a part of the universe, you understand that you actually contain as well the whole universe and have access through your individuated self to the totality of the whole. Hopefully I didn't lose you. That's some yoga philosophy and also astrology philosophy combined. If you're interested in that, the system of understanding, as well as some of the Kabbalistic approaches to understanding the descent from one consciousness into many consciousnesses, explain it sort of beautifully. But there's this idea in these systems that having a wound is the same as having the medicine for healing. This is in homeopathy, what they do. If you've ever been to a homeopathy or a homeopathic doctor, they will give you a little bit of the thing they think is causing the pain in you so that your body elicits the healing response in response to that. So that's in that same sort of philosophical system. So when we're looking at Chiron energy, we might be looking at something in ourselves which is wounded, right? In this case, it's the wound of acting too quickly, of having a vision that was not of the highest, or of forgetting your own power and capacity to act. Now, this will take place in different places in people's charts. Now, the other thing is sometimes people have done actions to you, which have also caused wounding. And with this placement in particular, it's offering you the thought that the shadows you have experienced in life, as well as the light you've experienced in life, are actually there for a profound purpose. So the universe doesn't just sort of harm us just because it's a mean kid with a magnifying glass with the ants. It's actually hidden in the wound. There is the balm, and often that balm, right? Sometimes we can avoid wounding. Great. Sometimes we're going through a cycle of learning to behave differently or do something differently so that we can grow. Great. And then sometimes things happen and we begin to ask why, right? We say, why is this happening? Because it seems senseless. It doesn't seem like a lesson I'm learning, and it doesn't seem like a cycle of behavior. And so it just seems maybe to the individual being cruel in some way. The astrology right here is suggesting that though we might not know fully why everything happens all the time, that when something does happen like that, the way forward from it is one, of course, to heal it in ourselves, to be able to offer ourselves the compassion, love, and right action to move forward with integrity, wholeness, and love. But then also sometimes it's there so that we can offer that same healing balm that we discover for ourselves for others. So you'll often notice the people who are solving a big issue in the world that you may have heard of or personally have experienced that very same level of pain themselves. And at the time when that pain was happening, they might have said like, why? I always love the example of Nelson Mandela, right? He was senselessly imprisoned for long periods of time. And if that was the only snapshot we had of Nelson Mandela, right, we would think, what a senseless, horrible thing to happen to an innocent person. But then when you look at the full lifespan of Nelson Mandela, right, you see oh my goodness, this man did go through a profound period of suffering. Did he deserve it? No. But was he able to create profound good for the world from it, right? By doing his work to end apartheid? Yes. And so, maybe you can think of examples in your own life from your own past where something's happened and you've thought, this isn't fair, this isn't right, this isn't really a lesson, this isn't what sort of pop cultural spirituality would say, like, I deserve from my actions, but maybe it sparked you to help another being. And that helping of another being might not have even yet occurred. Sometimes these things reverberate through many, many years or even lifetimes of a person's life. So I bring that up because Chiron as an archetype is not just, oh, we can heal our past wounds, but it's actually, oh, we can heal beyond ourselves, right? We can heal the world and we can invite the world back into a place of whole loving awareness. And in the sign of Aries, it's really interesting because Aries is the sign of true leadership. And this is leadership not by being a figurehead, who's just saying, wouldn't it be nice if everybody got along? This is leadership through doing. And so a big piece of this eclipse is if you do not see the change that you want to see in the world, maybe the invitation is to be the very change that you seek. And sometimes people think big scale, like, of course, some people make huge, impactful things and they're in the public eye. But I would suggest to you that it's not the individuals in the public eye or the big time leaders that we sort of look to in the various arenas of life, but that it is every individual in every community standing up and being that change that actually is the thing that would change the world. And so that's a big piece here. Now, I told you I'd get into some weird astrology. If your brain does not like the astrology technical stuff, you can ignore pieces of this. So don't feel like you have to understand everything in order to get the gist. But for those of you who do like to really tease out the details, this one's for you. So a couple things are going on in this chart. One, it is a cluster chart, and the cluster is being led by the planet Pluto. This indicates that Pluto is very palpable here, and Pluto, as you recall, the highest potency of it is profound transformation and the recollection of power. You might also remember that sometimes Pluto pulls the shadow up so that we can see it. Now, I'm telling you these things because sometimes, and a lot of you might decide to go within during this eclipse, but if you are sort of globally minded in this, if you're looking at what is happening, what's occurring on broader scales, you might think to yourself, wow, if I just watched the news, if I just looked around, I'd think things were getting worse, right? That is a piece of things. It's like if you ever have cleaned a closet and then your house is a mess filled with, and then you put it back and it's pristine. That's sort of like what's going on Earth right now, and particularly with a couple specific things. So we have this sort of coming up of the shadow. Now, the other thing in this chart that's interesting is there's a soul depositorship. What this means is that every planet eventually points to this planet, and the planet is Neptune. Neptune is presently in Pisces, and as well in Pisces, we have a very interesting conjunction between Mars and Saturn. Now, I don't like to fearmonger, and I think you should not listen to astrologers who fearmonger, because really the palpable, true statements that are being offered in astrology is the repetitive statement of do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of your life. Do not be afraid of the universe. Do not be afraid of what's happening, because underlying all of that, there is an energy of love. There is an energy of transformation. And even if things look bad on the outside, we are healing them through this sort of long process we sometimes feel like. So, so Saturn and Mars can be tricky influences. And I do apologize for bringing up probably 2 new topics to you today because I brought up the Soul Depositor. And the other topic that you might not have studied, or maybe some of you had, is declinations. So declinations are actually, if you look back in American history, the type of astrology that the founding fathers were using predominantly. But declinations are how far off of the equatorial plane planets are veering in the night sky. Okay, when planets have matching declinations or close declinations, they have a more powerful influence upon one another. And we are in some very weird stuff here because Mars and Saturn have very close declinations, as well as a conjunction in Pisces. Chiron, the sun and the moon, unsurprisingly, have the same declination. That's how eclipses work. But the sun, moon, and Chiron all have very close declinations in addition to being in the same degree and minute. And later in April, we're having a conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus, and they also have a very similar declination. So all of the planets are involved, and they're all relating to one another in a very sort of tight way. And that's why I'll be talking a bit longer today than in normal AMAs so that we can tease this out. So don't worry if that was all over the head, but let's get into why this might be interesting. And part of why this might be interesting is the archetype of Neptune himself, our soul depositor. Now, Neptune is the god of the sea. And the sea is representative of subconscious activity. This is the waters of life, which represent the ethereal waters from which all of manifest reality is made. Don't have to look very far to understand that manifest reality is sort of a mixed bag, right? We get some really good, beautiful things, and then we get like some problems. Sometimes, there's war, there's struggle, there's pain, there's various atrocities that we seem to create. Now, the reason for this, according to these systems, is of course that we humans have the capacity to direct the subconscious. But most of us don't realize our capacity to direct it. And so you'll see in your own life, you'll have some good things happen and then some other things. And you're like, okay, but what would happen if I always kept the highest interest at heart? What if I always abided in this energy of love and peace? Well, then presumably if we all did that, we could fix things, right? But we live as a collective. And so there's a lot of churning energies. There's a lot of healing energies right now. Neptune, for that reason, is sometimes painted as a very difficult god in mythologies. Okay. And you can think of these as aspects of your own consciousness if you happen to have a Jungian-minded self. And so you can think about Neptune as sort of the comeuppance of the power of the ocean when you start to really push in one direction, right? If you've gone down a path, this path, that path. Now, on one level, we're totally innocent. And I'd like to bring up a story about Neptune, which is that at one point, Neptune decides to send a sea monster to eat the princess Andromeda. Okay, so Neptune does this. Andromeda, in this case, is a young girl, right? She's a princess. She's not like a sort of adult figure. She's young and she's innocent. And Andromeda, of course, is a galaxy, right? But Andromeda is this energy which is representative of that which is innocent in you and deserves to be protected, right? And then Neptune can be like the influence of the external world. Now, Neptune can be very spiritual, right? He can be spiritual in a way that takes us into the highest planes of reality because we have set these intentions to be spiritual. We have chosen to walk the highest path, and Neptune can be your friend. But in this story, Neptune is not her friend. Neptune is sending a sea monster to eat her, or a whale, right? A whale or a sea monster to eat the princess Andromeda. So I bring this up because Neptune is the sole depositor here of this eclipse. And the fixed star that this eclipse is closest to is a star in that constellation which is the belly star of the sea monster. This star in particular has something to do with displacement, so being forced to move somewhere, or being compelled to move somewhere. This has energy of Saturnian influence, so the sort of pressures that come from the external plane. And so in this story, when we're looking at this, there's something very interesting going on, potentially for the collective, and then we'll look in your charts. And that is that things are transforming, our ideas are transforming, we are transforming. But until this point, and this has begun to happen already, but people for a long time liked to tease out the segments of their lives, right? We have religion and spirituality over here, where we think our high-minded thoughts and we, subscribe to the highest beliefs only. And then we have sort of like another plane of reality over here, where we're acknowledging what's going on as far as like the atrocities of the world, and we're working on humanitarian issues. And then we have kind of like our lives, which, may be separate from both of those in another way, because it's our homes, our families, our communities. And so we have like a globally minded consciousness, a personally minded consciousness, and a spiritually minded consciousness. And you can probably come up with other examples of arenas of life. And for a long time, one of the biggest questions people would ask of their religious leaders or their political leaders is, how do we reconcile these disparate things? How do we reconcile the belief that the universe is love with the facts that there's some rough stuff happening, right? And this is one of those questions that occurs in most human psyches. So the astrology right now is suggesting that the separation of these disparate areas of life are actually coming to an end. And this might come to an end, a gradual end, right? It's not like tomorrow everyone will wake up and there'll be perfect spiritual harmony, totally manifested perfectly in the earth plane, although it'd be nice, if that did. But there's an energy here where the separation of these things will begin to cease. So it won't be that we're talking about, light and love and manifestation over here, and then we're talking about, well, what do we do to fix like world issues over here? And then we're thinking about, oh, just my community and having a nice, springtime weekend over here. We'll actually begin to see the interplay of all of these things. Now, that being said, the astrology here is heavy hitting. You might see some very intense things playing out in the next 2 years, particularly in America's role in the world stage and America's role in the middle here. I'm just saying that because that's where the eclipse is largely heading over. But there's some big energy and big transitions here. Now, there's help though. It's Venus is still involved. She's going to be around. Mercury is retrograding, so hopefully he'll slow things down a bit and allow for some extra reflection. But the energy here with the declinations, with the cluster chart leading Pluto, with the sole depositorship of Neptune, and with the preliminating influence going into this big time Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, it's like it's like mind-boggling, as well as, you know, which fixed stars are coming into play. So I wanted to tell you guys all of that, just in case you were curious. Again, hopefully I didn't run right over your head with the declinations and the depositorships and all this stuff, but I just bring this up to emphasize that, yes, it's heavy hitting. Yes, it might be affecting, or it will be affecting the collective. And also, it's not without purpose. So things might come into light where we're like, oh my gosh, certain things have been happening that maybe we've been unaware of, you know, we weren't doing them, so we didn't know they were happening, right? And that can raise a lot of difficult feelings in people: guilt, rage, shame. Remember, guilt and stuff is a useless emotion, but taking right action, acknowledging what you see, acknowledging reality, and then endeavoring to be the field of influence, right? Spiritually, through your actions, through your emotions, through whom you talk to. There's no sense in trying to control another human being. You can't. So throw that out the window. But you can choose to be the exact influence that you wish you had seen previously in the world. So, yeah, so this is big time astrology. And there are influences. So all of these things can be used for spiritual practice, right? Of course, we can meditate during the eclipse. You yourself might have a positive experience of it. On the world stage, because usually on sort of the broader picture, you see the influences coming a bit more literally. We will see some upheaval, although you probably don't need astrology to tell you that. You can sort of look around and see there's certain things happening, conflicts in the world, contemplations of, you know, the people in the world who need the most help, if they're able to get help. The quality of life for all people, right? Ideally, as we move into the Aquarian age in the next 300 years, people will return to the space of every person having total freedom for their own self-directed life, and also total respect for every other person to have that same direction, as well as an absence of, you know, hunger, pain, suffering in the sort of really palpable way. Suffering, of course, persists in the psyche until we are able to release it sort of mentally, but I mean on the sort of physical level of reality. So that is the message of this eclipse. I wanted to share it with you fully, and also let you know this month could feel very shifty. And that's okay to feel shifty, to let go of any hindrance of being exactly who and what you want to be, because now is a beautiful time to be exactly the field of influence you want to be in the world. And whatever that is for you is exactly enough. It's not like sometimes people think they have to become superhuman because they read astrology or something. No, you just have to be the perfect field of influence that you already are, and take up the courage to be fully and authentically you. So now I'd love to look at your